So hi everyone. In this video we are going to discuss about AAA authentication. Okay, so I'll tell that what is AAA authentication and how to configure on Cisco Packet Tracer. You can configure this lab on Cisco Packet Tracer, GNS3, EVNG, PNet, Boson or any other simulator emulator. Okay. So same steps you can follow for practical. But right now, first of all, we need to understand the concept of AAA authentication, which is very, very important before configuration of AAA authentication. And it's a like a smart question for interview. Okay. So it is important to learn the everything about AAA authentication and make sure after this video, you will get more exposure about AAA authentication and you will get good knowledge or lab about AAA authentication. Okay, so first of all, what is AAA? Okay, so the function or the purpose of AAA means it is a framework. Basically AAA, it is a framework of AAA. Okay, means A. Okay, so there is 3A and the purpose of this framework to or it is used to control and monitor network access. Okay, for user and devices. Okay, for user and devices. So A means, first A means authentication, and then second A means authorization. We can perform authentication lab only, or we can perform authorization, or we can perform authentication, authorization and accounting. Okay, so the last one is accounting. Okay, the last one is accounting. The purpose of authentication is verify who the user or device is. Means it is just for authentication. It uses different method for authentication, like device or user use username and password or biometric security, okay, or digital certificate. So these are for authentication. Okay, and for example, if you want to get more exposure about authentication, so let me give an example. Like for example, if this user want to access remotely for this router, so user log on or logs into a router with a username and password. Okay, means whenever there is username and password credential, so this user need to go with username and password. This is the authentication method. Okay, for example, your phone biometric security, your phone pin password or any type of password you can enable in your phone or in your laptop, desktop, whatever, to like authenticate the device. Okay, before use you need to give or apply the password, okay, or correct password for authentication, right? And then next one is authorization. The meaning of authorization means it determine, basically authorization determine what the user or device can do, what user and device can do. Okay, means after login in your device, what you have permission to manage or to modify. Okay, means what types of permissions you have to manage the resource. Okay, so the meaning of this authorization is to granting the permission. Okay, is to granting permission, okay, to access resources, okay, or perform action. And then accounting is track what the user or device did. Okay, means it track or keep the all records about the user and device, means log activity, session duration, data usage, changes made, okay, by the user and device. So you can monitor each and everything. So this way you can answer like this is the framework, and through this we can authenticate, authorize, and track the complete detail about user and device, right? So next thing, there is two protocol in AAA authentication, right? If you want to enable the AAA authentication, so there is two protocol for AAA. There is two authentication protocol. First one is radius. The first one is radius, and then second one is Tacacs, TACACS, और Tacacs आप कुछ भी इसको बोल सकते हो, प्रोनाउंस कर सकते हो, right? So radius means it is a remote authentication protocol. It is a remote authentication protocol, okay, for dial-in user and all, right? And the purpose of this to maintain centralized management or centralized authentication and authorization. For example, it uses UDP protocol, okay, and it only encrypt the password. It only encrypt password, okay. For example, you can reply like Wi-Fi network or VPN type of network, okay, and the port number of radius is 1812 and 1813, okay. And then next one is Tacacs, which is for terminal access, okay, but this uses TCP. Tacacs uses TCP, and it encrypt all payload, means all information, right? It encrypt all information, means encrypt entire payload, and it is more granular command level authorization preferred for device management like router and switch, okay. So the benefit of AAA authentication is single point managing user credential and permission with the help of uh, like uh, AAA single point, okay, or centralized management of user and permissions, or user and credentials, permissions and devices, okay, means it is a centralized management for user and devices, and easier to auditing and logging for user activity. It is very easy to log the activity, to monitor the activity, okay, to accountability, okay. And strong security policy across all over network. It maintains strong security policy, right? But there is dedicated ACS server. What does ACS server do? ACS stand for access control server. Access control server, right? Access control server means it maintain access control for every user and device, okay. It maintain AAA authentication, authorization, and accounting, okay. Basically there is a dedicated Cisco ACS server, Cisco ACS, and this ACS server control the activity, or control the, or maintain the centralized management of AAA function, okay. It uses radius as well as TACACS, okay. And ACS server authenticate, authorize, and accounting for user, okay. In authentication, it verify the user credential. In authorization, it define what commands or network resources a user can access. In accounting, it determine that what logs users activity for auditing or reporting, okay. And the next one is whenever ACS server, whenever a network admin log into the Cisco ACS server or log into the Cisco router. For example, this user want to access this router remotely through SSH. Okay. So when this user trying to access SSH, this router send the or contact the ACS server for credential. Okay. At that time, router contact Cisco ACS server and ACS server check the user credentials for authentication and apply the user permission for authorization and log the session detail for accounting. Okay, means the ACS server maintain authentication, authorization and accounting. Is that clear? Now you can see how to or what is the process to configure the things. Either you can configure just AAA AAA or A authentication with router only. There is no need to go with ACS server. Either you can use ACS server. So in my condition, I'm going to use ACS server. Okay. So first of all, we need to apply the IP addresses for all devices, and we need to do the basic configuration of all devices. Then we will apply AAA authentication. So I have done the IP address for this device and the IP address for this device. Okay, you can see, and the IP address for this server. Yes, I have done the IP configuration for this server as well. Okay, so let's configure the device. First of all, I'm going to configure the router. Okay, so go to the router and select CLI and you can start configuration. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to rename the host, which is R1, enter, and then I'm going to assign the IP address for this device, which is 10.0.0.1 on interface G0/0/0. Okay, it is very important, or it is the prerequisite, or these are the prerequisite configuration like IP address on all interfaces and all, right? So 10.0.0.1 and 255.0.0.0 done, and then no shutdown to turn on the interface. Okay, so this is the simple configuration for this device. Okay, and if you want to enable the remote access for this device, so you can type IP domain name, and I'm going to assign the domain name, which is ciscolive.com, enter, and then crypto key generate RSA, enter, and there is by default 512 bits modulus. You can increase it with 4096, either you can leave it as it is. So I'm going to use default modulus, which is 512 bits. Okay, and done. Now I'm going to configure line space VTY space 0 to 4, and then done, and then transport input SSH, enter, and then exit. Configuration has done. Okay, so configuration for router 1 has done. Now you can configure switch. Okay, same thing I'm going to configure for switch. Okay, first of all, I'm going to rename the switch, which is SW1. So host SW1. Okay, enter, and then interface space VLAN 1, interface space VLAN 1, but because by default all port of switch have access of VLAN 1, so I'm going to assign interface VLAN 1, and the IP address for this interface is 10.0.0.5 as per given diagram. Okay, and then mask, then no shutdown, and then exit. And it is important to assign the telnet or SSH for remote access. Okay, so I'm going to assign IP domain name. You can choose any name. I'm going to use choose cisco.com. Okay, enter, and then crypto key generate RSA, enter, and then line space VTY space 0 to 4, enter, and then transport input SSH, done, exit to exit. Okay, and I think all configuration done according to remote access protocol and interface. Now I'm going to assign the AAA configuration for switch. Okay, so for switch you can start AAA new model, enter, and then you can select radius hyphen server, and then host. Okay, so radius host is 10.0.0.50. Okay, 10.0.0.50, sorry, 50, and space key. I'm going to use a key which is password. Okay, and enter. And next thing, I'm going to use AAA authentication and login, and default radius, group radius, enter. And then AAA authentication, instead of login you can use enable, and then enable default and group and radius. Okay, radius, done. Now the configuration of switch has done. Now next thing, you can start configuration for a router. Okay, now you can check switch, now you can access switch through SSH. Okay, from the remote device. And yes, ACS server will like authenticate or authorize or like accounting the details. Okay, so next thing, I'm going to assign the AAA for this router. So AAA new model, enter, or you can just use radius. Okay, and then server, I'm going to use radius server with any name, enter. And then address, I'm going to use IP version 4 for radius server. Okay, you can see as per diagram, I'm going to assign the IP details. And then key, so I'm going to use key which is password, enter, done. Okay, now you can just exit from the configuration, and you can start configuration of AAA authentication. Okay, so AAA and authentication and login. Okay, default group radius, done. And AAA authentication and enable default group radius. Okay, so I'm going to use I have used like a default group. Okay, and all configuration done. And then at last, you need to enter the username and other details for ACS. Okay, now I'm going to open ACS server, and you can click on services and then click on AAA authentication, and you can just turn on the AAA. Okay, according to radius and the client name. If you want to allow the radius authentication for this switch, so you need to add the client. So I'm going to use switch 1. Okay, and this is R1. Basically this is R1. Okay, so for switch 1, the IP address is 10.0.0.5, and I'm going to use or share the secret key which is password. Okay, already I configured this particular password or secret key on router as well as on switch. Okay, so password, and then click on add button. Then you can use multiple users like Cisco username, Cisco password. You can use other multiples of users. Okay, admin, and you can add another users like Cisco and admin 123. Okay, it depends like what is your requirement and all, right? So 123 and enter. Some user, sorry, just Cisco 1 and then Cisco 1, done. Okay, and same thing you can configure for router 1. So R1 client name, and the address for R1 is 10.0.0.1, and you can see the secret key is password, and then add. Now you can just access the remotely these devices. Okay, now I'm going to open the PC terminal. Okay, and you can see there is telnet and SSH, and I'm going to use to access the router which is 10.0.0.1. This is the router IP, and username is Cisco. I'm going to connect it. I'm going to assign the password which is Cisco, and you can wait for few seconds. Okay, it will prompt for another username and password. So you can wait. Yes, now you can see. You can just click on enter and you can see it will ask for username. So you can type Cisco or any username or other details. Okay. So you can type username and password as per the given database. Okay, as per the ACS database. So this is the simple configuration of AAA. And if you want to learn that how to configure authorization and accounting with real environment, so comment down in the comment box, and definitely in the next video I'll cover the everything. Okay, so see you in the next session. Thank you so much. Have a good day.